Oh, alright. I should kill the lights. Is this one of the ones that has that? Yes. Awesome. There we go. So, how is everybody? How was the weekend? Pretty good? Good. Over the weekend there was the Tesla Electric City Festival at the Steam Museum. It was,
How would you rate it?
4 out of 10. The only redeeming, like, it was generally like, yeah, the only redeeming factor was like the Steam Museum itself was quite cool and admission was donation. Yeah, down on Woodward. And also they have like a scale model train out in the outdoors where like the train is like this big, but you get to like ride on it like this and they take you around the track. It's very, very cool. The child really enjoyed it, so one of the children anyway. The other one wanted nothing to do with it because he has an instinctive distrust of anything mechanical.
Is that born through a traumatic event or?
He was just born with it. Just hates elevators, trains that are moving, like anything that's actually like moving of its own accord. He doesn't trust technology.
Oh, elevators could be a tricky one because that's like a portal, right?
Yeah.
One room. Door closes, door opens, someone in your room.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like to the brain of like a 2-year-old, what is an elevator?
Yeah.
You know, it's a magic portal. You know, absolutely. All right. So, I hope everybody caught the live streams. Did everybody watch the live streams?
I only watched one.
You only watched the first one? Why didn't you watch the second one? But they had all weekend. They're recorded.
I had like, for me, I had your assignment to do. I had other tests to do. But I'm definitely going to watch it.
Okay, do it before the assignment is due. Watch the second live stream before the assignment is due because I go through the assignment in that live stream. Yes.
The server's down.
The server's down.
I
What
can't
server?
upload anything.
But CS Unix is down?
Oh no, I've been using FileZilla.
Well, FileZilla also connects to CS Unix.
Yes, CS Unix is completely down.
Unix is down. I have to use local.
I can't access it. I can't log in.
Not that I don't trust you.
Yeah, you just want to verify.
Let me see. Because like, were you at home trying to connect to it without the VPN or something?
I tried to connect it with the VPN, and then I got here today, and I tried it this morning, and it didn't work either. I would have uploaded my assignment.
Well, fortunately, the due date isn't until Friday.
Did you upload the stuff? Yeah? Like
Yeah,
the server?
it might be.
I can view stuff.
It might be like the FTP server is down, but like the SSH one isn't.
That might be the case.
Maybe.
I can't upload anything.
Let me try Putty first.
Yeah, I think the FTP server.
Where's that? And they will cross. Well. That should be responding faster than that.
I was having a problem like, yeah, the response is just so slow.
Well, isn't this just a lovely kettle of fish? All right, this is like a major issue, but if somebody could please still email me about it anyway, so that it's on, like, I will file the appropriate paperwork to get the IT people to do something about this.
This is my old experience on that.
Alright.
Example, because it's not working.
Well, if you can't access, if it's not, like, if the server is properly down, mine should be down too.
If you do 10259, that one works.
I think it's just the FTP that's not.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can't upload anything.
can't upload anything, I can still get my stuff though.
It's not really an issue for right now, it's just when you go to submit the assignment, you can't upload it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can still, yeah,
Cage with it. Or
okay.
Cage with it.
Well,
So I'm giving her.
Just more, yeah.
this is an excellent reason to have XAMPP,
Yes.
right?
Agree.
So, apparently the server is down. I'll do everything within my power to get the server back up as soon as possible, but you gotta go through IT for this. So, we're gonna have to talk to IT. I'm sure, that Professor Adams is already aware of the problem.
He is.
He is? Yeah.
Where he sent emails out to I think everybody.
Okay. Alright.
So should I still send
Like-
an email?
Nah, it's okay. If Steve's on the case, he'll get the job done. But yeah, so just to reiterate some of the key technology in this class. You remember how we had the XAMPP server which spoofs the server so that you can actually do the development work without needing CS Unix? Well, if CS Unix is down, then there's no other way to do your assignment, now is there? So, yeah. Anybody need a reminder about XAMPP? Need me to go through that again? Are y'all good? Good? Okay, cool. Oakley dokley. So, shall we then proceed with our material? Again, it's of critical importance that everybody in the room go in and watch those live streams that I did to catch us up last week, because much important critical information is included there, including a go-through assignment 1, which I think everyone will find extremely valuable. Sounds like a lot of people have started on assignment 1 already, which I think is extremely good planning on everyone's part, but just so you know, I go through it in detail as well. Question?
Where do we watch the first live stream?
It's on his YouTube channel.
Yeah, everything's on my YouTube channel.
Like, where's the YouTube channel?
Oh, they might still be unlisted, but if you go through the playlist, then it'll be. There are links in the feed as well, in the announcements feed. Yeah, okay, I'll repost the links. Fine. Fine, I'll repost the links. I'm pretty sure, like, for the second one, I had literally, like, 0 people. I was literally talking to dead air the whole time. I imagine that's probably because everyone had a class that conflicted.
Actually.
Yeah, well, yeah, you still gotta watch the video, so. Anyway. So, we move on. We're gonna talk about arrays. We're going to talk about superglobals, which are slightly less fun and exciting than they sound. And we are going to then talk a little bit about cross-site scripting attacks. So, arrays then. So in PHP, arrays behave very similarly to lists in Python. We're not talking about arrays in the Java sense here. So important ways to distinguish them. The size of an array in PHP is not fixed like it is in Java. It grows and shrinks dynamically as the program executes. Yes.
Why can't we all just decide to call an array, and a list, a list?
Different from that, different.
Yeah.
So, is it a list and you just call it an array, or is it kind of somewhere in between?
So so you guys haven't done data structures and algorithms yet, but there is a functional difference between an array and a list. My suspicion is that arrays here are probably approximate to array lists in Java. So they underneath the hood, they are stored and maintained as arrays because arrays are faster and more efficient. But enough functions are provided that provide the interface of a list. So you get these dynamic functions on a static data structure, basically. You guys want me to go through quickly the difference between an array and a list?
Later, because I.
Later?
Later.
Later? Okay. Alright. Unless anybody else wants to see it, you don't get to dictate everything. Yeah. Anybody want to see it, or shall we save that for data structures and algorithms?
Let's see it.
Let's see it? Okay.
Short
Very
summary.
quickly then. So, an array, if you imagine your hard drive, right? An array is a continuous chunk of memory that has been sectioned off and is used by a computer program. So you store numbers in it like so. Right? That's an array. A list, or what's more commonly called a linked list, is not a continuous chunk of memory. It is a series of small chunks of memory which contain references to each other. References kind of in the Java sense a little bit, like an object reference, except the object is very small. So, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, in other programming languages, we would call these pointers. But the word pointer is scary and avoided most of the time. And that's a null pointer at the end. So, this is a list, that's an array. The reason that an array is static is because this is a big chunk of memory and it's difficult to find a place for it if it's sufficiently large, right? If you increase the size of an array dynamically and run out of adjacent free memory, you have to copy the whole damn thing to another region of memory. It's an expensive operation, right? With these, because the individual nodes are very, very small, they're very easy to sort of fit into like the cracks in memory, right? So increasing and decreasing the size of this thing is relatively easy, even in the middle of the array, or even in the middle of the list. Like for example, if I wanted to put 2.5 in here, 2.5, all I have to do is redirect this arrow over here, direct that to where that one was pointing, and boom, it's done, right?
Technically, the rest become 3 and 4, but like if there's no.
Yeah, like these no longer correspond to indexes,
Yeah.
right? But that's how easy it is to add something to a list. Like everything except the node that you were adding stays in the same place. Is the camera doing okay?
Yep, that's right.
We're recording, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Whereas, if you wanted to insert something in an array between 3 and 4, what you have to do, you have to either hope you have free memory at the end of here, or have to move the whole thing. Then, you have to copy, 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 insert. Right? It's a much more expensive operation. In more formal terms, we say that the amount of time that operation takes is proportional to the length of the data structure. Whereas here, it is not proportional to the length of the data structure, making it much faster. So for mutating operations, these are way faster. But so the trade-off is this. With an array, you can access any element of the array just by performing a little mathematics. Because you just take the first memory address of the array, like whatever the index is the offset from that address. You just calculate the new address using like the plus sign, right? And then you access that new memory. Or you access the memory you want. So that's very, very fast. Array access, very, very fast. In a list, if I wanted to find, the fourth element, I have to say, okay, because you always have a pointer to the start, right? It's like, okay, start here, and then here, and then over here, okay,
That's why
and
arrays,
there we go.
that's why array lists in Java don't have like array list instance, like brackets index, they have .get because it's a function, you're actually making
Yeah,
the whole damn thing go looking for the reference.
precisely.
Alright,
In a list, to access any particular element, to look up an element, you have to trace the data structure. So array access is proportional to the size of the number of things you're storing, whereas here, it's a constant time. So if it's something that you're retrieving data from frequently, this is the better data structure. So just because everything languages like Python, which are strongly dynamic, like to pretend that lists are the better data structure. But in fact, there's no such thing as a better data structure, right? There's no such thing as a better data structure. They are all a series of trade-offs. Yes?
This is linked list or array list?
This is linked list. This is an array. An array list is an array which has functions associated with it which make it seem like it's a linked list. So it adds like the insert operation. It adds add and delete, pop and push, and all of these types of functions, which we typically think of as belonging to dynamic data structures. So what the array list allows you to do is treat the array, the humble array, as if it were a dynamic data structure when it's not. And the cost that you pay is performance, right? So that being said, Java also supports linked lists in the regular sense, right? So you can also use one of these in Java directly. But, so in PHP, when they say array, they mean an array, but you also have some dynamic functions, right? So in that way, it behaves like Python's list, even though Python's list is one of these. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay. All right. Yeah. So, I get like a hair in your mouth. Disgusting. So, the character that you use to say this is an array in PHP is the square brace. Older versions of PHP required an array function, but the current preferred syntax is to not do that. That's like in versions of PHP older than 5.4, you had that weird syntax where you had to call an array like it's a function to create it and stuff like that. We don't worry about that. That looks reasonably like Python. right? It's like Python with semicolons. So go with that syntax, all right? If you see any examples on the internet that create an array using the array keyword, you know that they are old, all right? And we want to teach you new, good programming, not old, bad programming. So, also similarly to Python's lists, you can mix data types inside these things. Unlike Java's like anything really, where everything was monotyped. Here, red 2355.7, you can see all of that cohabiting nicely in the same data structure.
What's the B, like, A is supposed to mean?
I'm so happy that you asked. That is an associative array. So, I don't think they did dictionaries with you in Python, did they? All right. Well, it's useful to do that as well. I might as well teach you that while I'm teaching you the other thing. Paizo is just a Python thing. It's got the console, it's got the interpreter, and that's all I really need. What, Paizo? I mean, it kind of sucks a little bit, but, you know. Yeah. Right. You say you're running, but are you? Is the internet down now? Okay, well, all right. Anybody want to take a bet on how many other things can go wrong today? Rhetorical question.
I'll be hit by a car again.
I'll bet you
Again? Were you hit by a car recently?
Like 5 months ago.
If that's recently enough, that's
It's
terrible.
like it bumped me. It bumped me. It was about to actually like knock me to the ground. I was like, what the hell, man?
If that what makes you happy, then I'm not judging.
Okay.
No,
So, associative arrays, while I'm waiting for the internet to wake up. So, an associative, yeah, you don't say. Thank you. Alright. This is why the internet is stupid and nobody should use it. Anyway. I mean, yeah, no, but anyway, let's not talk about that first. Associative arrays. Alright. So, basically, it's an array where you get to use strings instead of numeric indexes. But you have to define the strings. So, in this case, we have name gets test. So, if we were to write in our PHP program, be at name, we would get test. Does that make sense? Question?
Is it like a key? Because
Yes. Yeah. Another way this is commonly referred to is key value pairs.
yeah.
Which is basically the same thing as dictionaries in Python. Python's a little more flexible because it can use any data type. Here, I believe we're restricted to strings. Question?
So is array in PHP an ordered list?
Is it an ordered list? Well, it depends on what you have, right? A regular array in PHP, we generally do think of those as being ordered, but associative arrays are generally not thought of as being ordered because, like, alphabetic ordering on strings is a less useful ordering than numeric ordering on the natural numbers, right? So, here's a question. Can I run exam?
Your connection to the server has been lost. Please log in again.
Oh, God's sake! Half of my life is strewn with cow pats from the devil's own satanic herd.
Man, can't wait to go back and watch the video on this class.
Yeah, right? Well, see, that's the thing about my videos. It's always authenticity, you know? It's not a canned production. When things go wrong, you see things go wrong. Will this work now?
Are we still trying to do the Python thing, or because it?
No,
Okay. Oh gosh.
I've lost my verve, you know? No, I just want to get the PHP working. Let's not worry about anything outside that. Although I did notice Paizo. Is Paizo? Is you here? Hey, there we go.
Trying to think
Okay.
more about the PHP thing, we're already.
Alright. So, this is a Python interpreter. Basically, a dictionary and a associative array in PHP work the same way. This is how it works in Python. If we have apple yielding 5, banana yielding Mario, and 9 yielding everything else, then D at apple is 5, banana is Mario, and 9 is everything else. Right. Yeah, so dictionary is just a set of key value pairs, where these are the keys, and these are the values, right? First one key, second one value, right? So you provide one, it looks up the other, right? Now, pardon me. Another way in which these things in Python and PHP work the same is you add new ones just by assignment. So, new key equals, new value, and then if we ask for it, we get it, right? So, there you go, now you know a little bit more Python. We've got Apache running. Let's get VS Code. If the internet chooses to cooperate. Yeah, it's hanging again. Alright, I guess we're back to I hate Windows so much. Alright. You're gonna run? Alright. big4.php. Putting that in C drive, xampp, htdocs, big4.php, create file. There we go. Bing, bang, boom. Open tag, close tag. There we go. Open up on Firefox, localhost, slash you're gonna make me look it up, or advanced, accept the risk. There we go, good, load. So when you're declaring an array, if you leave this empty, you declare an empty array, which they are very useful in a lot of different circumstances, especially when combined with loops. You can build up from an empty array by appending things, and it's very useful. Notice that unlike in Java, we do not have to include any data type here or any indication that it's an array. So the indication that it's an array is considered part of the data type. We don't do that in PHP, so there you have it. It's in the Python style. So if we have an associative array, Mario gets player 1, Luigi always gets player 2, and the dinosaur they rode in on is a power-up. I will fight you on that. He's not a character, he's a power-up. So let's just, for the time being, view this data. So you can see, echoing the value at key Mario yields player 1. Here's a problem though. In PHP, we like to do this thing where we splice variable reading into a string, right? So what happens if we say something like, you are my friend? VS Code is immediately barking at us.
What's the use of the string concatenation?
Yeah, there are a couple of ways around it. But the problem, of course, if we're using the quotes inside here to designate that this is a string inside of a string, then the interpreter thinks that's the end of the string you're currently on, which means that you're now in syntax error territory, right? So there are a couple of ways to go about fixing this. The weirdest way is that PHP actually doesn't require the quotes. Which should make a lot, I see a few of you cringing. Probably rightly so. So yeah, what sorcery is this? Yes. So yeah, do you want strings that don't need quotes for you to know that they're strings? Well, try PHP, my friend.
2 less characters.
It is 2 less characters.
$2 million sign.
Yeah. incidentally, if you think, oh, I can get around this using single quotes, you're wrong. You know that thing where usually you can use single quotes inside double quotes and double quotes inside? Yeah, even though PHP doesn't recognize the distinction between strings and characters, it does recognize the difference between double quotes and single quotes, so doesn't work. The preferred way to do this that makes programmers the least angry is to use curly braces. Yes, but that is still superior to the following. The fourth way,
Basic concatenation.
basic concatenation.
I don't know. I prefer basic concatenation.
If you want to use it, I will not discourage you, but
I don't look at the issues clock. Okay.
yeah, even if you remove these extraneous space characters, you can see by our end of line check that we are up 2 characters. So yeah, so that's how you get at the stuff in an associative array. Associative arrays are actually very, very useful. One of the things that they figure into is JSON, right? We talked a little bit about JSON in client side, but we didn't really dig really deeply into it, you know? You guys remember JavaScript objects?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh no, not JavaScript. I know Java objects.
Java objects we did just so much. Yeah.
JavaScript
Nice.
objects are more so dictionaries.
Yes, basically, yeah, except you can also attach methods to them.
But that's correct from JavaScript where you can attach functions to variables. So technically,
Yeah.
it's still just
Listen, JavaScript is the worst language, and it should not be held up as an example for anyone, but basically, the way that objects are used in JavaScript most of the time is as associative arrays. The JSON format, right? It has 2 different collection types, right? Aside from all of your basic stuff like integers and booleans and strings and all of that stuff, it has 2 ways of constructing collection types. One is to use what are basically arrays, but you can call them lists if you really want to. JSON doesn't actually care whether they get implemented as arrays or lists because that's independent. It's just a format, right? It doesn't care how you implement things. The other thing that JSON can include is associative arrays or dictionaries. So, for example, pretty sure, yeah, there we go. A totally valid JSON would be something like name Mario. I like to put the commas at this side because it just looks nice. Occupation. Plumber. Games. Mario Bros. Mario 2, etc.
This reminds me of the Ajax that we did, the final one that we did, that's where you have to take the keys
good that that's reminding you of that, because this is exactly what that is, right? The JSON that you were receiving from the server when you did assignment 5 in client side, you did, for the third part, you used JSON.decode, right? In order to,
Streamify or something like that.
yeah. And you got out a data structure like this. You accessed the individual fields by getting through the keys to the values in exactly this manner. So it is useful to know that you have that same data structure available to you in PHP because, if our object in PHP is to collect up a bunch of data, encode it as a JSON, and kick it out to the client, it's useful to have a native data structure in which to do that, right? Which is what this is. And please note, that is a double line. That's a 2-line equals sign. Anybody remember what 1-line equals sign is?
Hyphen.
Assignment?
Initializing?
Is it wrong?
No. If I have this in PHP, what does that mean?
Association.
Bitewise?
This is the equivalent of dot in Java, actually. So it's object arrow field instead of object dot field.
So that's a way to call your method.
That's you call methods out of objects. You call fields out of objects. Call them. You look up the field in the object, like any variables you have, like instance variables in classes in PHP get accessed through an arrow with 1 line. Associative array relationships between values and keys are set up with the 2 lines. And you know why it's not dot? Anybody care to guess?
Because that's concatenation.
Because that's concatenation. That's give this man a cigar. Yes, PHP is pretty strict about its operators only meaning one thing, right? We all noticed this with the plus sign, right? And plus sign concatenation difference. So PHP only likes its operators to do one thing. That's concatenation has already been given to the dot. So in contravention of all programming standards since C, they decided to make it not dot to get the field out of an object. Although this is also derived from C syntax. In C syntax, this is the way that you do this if this is a pointer to an object instead of directly the object itself. But it doesn't matter. It is also C derived. Anyway, question?
So with assigned key values, let's say I assigned index 9 and index 1 to an array. How do you check the key value without having to echo it or view it on console right line? You know what I mean? How do you test for that value? Because if I'm I can't loop through index 0 and 9, I'll hit a bunch of nulls, I assume. Or would it just throw an error? How does it coordinate that? Because the length no longer.
Thank you very much for this question. So the question is then, if I've got one of these things, and I've got say, for example, some numbers as the keys, how on earth do I actually navigate this data structure? How do I know what the keys are, what the values are? How do I know what my set of keys is to go over? How do I do this without ending up with a bunch of trying to access elements that don't exist? And in general, trying to access all possible elements is we try to avoid that in general. So basically, the solution is the Python solution.
Wait, what?
We use for each loops. So hopefully everybody remembers how for loops worked in Python. And hopefully everybody remembers how the enhanced for loop in Java worked. The enhanced, I always do the finger quotes for enhanced loops because they're literally the only people who call it that. Everyone else calls it a for each loop. And as you can see, in PHP, it actually is literally called a for each loop. So, that functionality gets built in. So, let's take a look at how this interacts with associative arrays. So, for each. And in contrast to Java, you put the data structure first. Question?
I was just gonna say, is this kind of like the for of in JavaScript?
No.
Like the for, like X of, like I know there's like a for loop like that in JavaScript, I'm not sure if it's similar or.
The way I saw it in the client-side material was you take the data structure and call a for each method on it.
It's like if you have a list, like if you call your, what do you call it, a list, it's like list dots for each
Yeah.
bracket item, and then you cannot do a, what do you call it, a lambda function.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you, yeah. That's how you do that in JavaScript, I believe.
Yes, it's very annoying.
Yes. Lambdas are just kind of, in general, a pain unless you have extensive training with them, as I do. So, even I find them annoying. So, yeah. So a key syntactic difference here between the for each loop here and the for each loop in Java. Our middle keyword here is as. It's not colon, right? And in Python, it's in. Here it's as. So there you go. Also, data structure first, then the name of all of the variables. Or, yeah, the name that each value is given on each iteration. So, for B as element,
Shouldn't it be
shouldn't it be what?
you're trying to iterate B, right? So should it, oh, no, never mind. Oh, that's fine.
Wait, do I have an error?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
You need some.
Things I have. Oh yeah, it's true.
For JavaScript, you don't.
And Python is strongly discouraged. Alright. So, notice what it's picking out here, right? It's picking out the values, not the keys. Now the keys might also contain useful information, right? So, what PHP introduces is a little concept called pattern matching. If you know that the element you're looping over is an associative array, you can formulate it as such. Key gets value. Then, you can use both of these. So this is the way to declare variable names for both the key and the value pair, in that pair, right? In general, this is kind of, we call this pattern matching. In other languages, the way that it kind of works, I'm not sure about PHP, probably. You provide some pattern here, it does its best to match things up according to the pattern, right? So, because this is an associative array, and we're putting one in, it knows what to do with it, so there you go. Bob's your uncle.
Can I try and, because ultimately code is like a bit of, like at the top is a bit of human language per se.
Okay.
So that would be human like for each in B, return values of keys. something like that, that's, and because we're essentially calling for key to give us the associated value, we get access to both of them, so we can actually echo them. Something like that, my brain's melting that.
Let me speak it in plain English, as close as I can get in plain English. For each element of data structure B, interpreted as a key value pair, with key matching key and value being matched to value, echo the string, the value of key gets the value of value break. Is that good?
Yeah, someone was asking something, sorry.
Oh, was there another question? Anyone, anywhere? Yes, no, maybe so? No? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so associative arrays. Any questions about them so far? Yes.
So, is it possible, is there a function to not add to the associated array instead of like just typing it out, like say you
Yes.
already have?
Sorry, you want to finish your question?
No, you don't.
I feel like we were in jeopardy there, where like I knew the answer before you finished the question, so I just hit the buzzer. Yeah, wait, no, sorry. So, the way that you add a new element to the dictionary is the same way as in Python. You simply assign to an unused key.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that puts it in. Make sense? There will also be a delete function. Let me see here. Maybe it's in the slides. Unset. Yes. I mean, personally, I find that a bit unsettling. Unset the at Luigi or Luigi.
And then it's remove the key and the value.
Yes, it deletes the entry. This also works on regular arrays. You can delete entries in them.
Okay.
In fact, let's see an example of that while we're at it. So, there we go. We now have our regular array of numbers printed. Unset A at 3. I'm semicolon. Gets me every time. There we go. 0, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. So 3 gets deleted.
So like pop. I can
I don't think so actually, because maybe it returns the value. Let's see. The critical thing about a pop operation is that it returns the value.
Oh, it's by void.
Yeah. So it doesn't seem to return anything that we want to echo, so it just deletes. Python has a del operation, which is pretty similar.
Is that for set fill or is that, would that be used for like the list?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you use it for everything.
Oh, really? The feature of the reference was
Yeah. Good. So, the unset keyword deletes.
Strength to echo.
I feel like I'm teaching two classes. You guys are so spread out, you know. And I know I'm over there a lot because that's where the computer is.
Fine.
Just know, I still love you. I still want you to succeed. Okay? I mean, ostensibly.
I know it was on the icon.
I think I get fired if I don't want you to succeed.
Just blame Mauricio.
Okay, that's okay. Good.
You're his scapegoat.
Of course, you know, I'll check with you if you've got that.
And they, so.
Okay. So this is about oh my. Oh, all right. There we go. That was bound to happen. All right. So what was I talking about? Yes, section ended, new section started. So character arrays then. PHP, similarly to Python, likes to pretend that characters don't exist. Of course, we have all studied a proper programming language in Java, and we know that characters exist. But basically what this means is that the individual elements of a string are provided the same interface as the string itself if you access any of them individually. So, you can access the individual elements of a string using indexing, the same way that you would on a regular array. Numeric indexing works. So there you go. Make sense?
There's a char function for PHP. I tried using it for the assignment, but it never worked. I think it's string underscore char or something.
String underscore char.
I think I'm not sure. Yeah, string char.
String. Oh. Oh no, you're in deep water right now. Yeah, no, that's my friend. That is a C standard library function. Yeah, that does very much not what you think it does.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing about PHP which I've noticed, and only a C programmer such as myself would be able to tell you this. They seem to have worked in a lot of functions from the C standard string library in as prelude functions. This is actually where strlen comes from as well.
Yeah.
String length, yeah. Pardon me. If you see a function with a very, very abbreviated name that starts str, that's most likely a C standard library function. Like, basically, the idea here is that it, like, I know in C what it does, I believe it returns a pointer to the first character matching the character you're looking for in the string.
Yeah.
Which is not, I'm sure, what you were looking for. You just wanted the number, so just use indexing. But yeah, the C standard library has an interesting view of strings, and since it's part of the kernel, this is actually how strings work. Like, in general, any string function really that you find will be calling the C standard library function in backend like 99.9% of the time, unless it's doing something very strange. Yes?
Can you, I know in Python you can use like a split, like using the colon, to like going, kind of like looping through, like not looping, but it's, you're going through a list, right? Use the colon, use like the colon between the square brackets. Can you do that in PHP? Or
Did you say TikTok? Why not?
It's string token, string tokenize. Yeah,
so it's kind of like the Python, but it's just called string.
yeah. String token splits a string into smaller strings, with each token being delimited by any character from token. That is, can have a string like, this is an example string. You can tokenize the string to its individual words by using space character as the token.
So if I put 0 and then the token value like 3, it would be from 0 to 3 index value. Like it would like.
No, it doesn't work on indexes. It works by what character it's looking at. So if you chose the space as the tokenizing character, it would return this is an example string as individual strings.
So it would just return, instead of index, it would just be a string character, right?
Yeah, I believe in Python the equivalent here is, this is a sequence dot split on space. Yeah, that's what it does.
Oh, okay, that's completely different than what I thought.
Yeah. But, you know, you could probably massage it into what you wanted, right? I'm not sick. I still have phlegm in my throat. I know. Everybody thinks, oh, he's just lying. I'm not lying. I'm not sick. I swear it. Anyway, okay, where were we? Yeah, okay. So string length. Again, that's one of those funny, those funny C standard library functions. You guys, are you guys cool with like 5 minutes on how the C standard library deals with strings? Are you interested?
Yes.
You're interested. Anybody else? Okay, I've got a second. Okay. All right. So, facts about the C programming language. All right. In C, strings are literally just character arrays. Character is a recognized data type. In C, C does not have the ability to detect when it's trying to read from outside of an array. So this is kind of a subtle point, but let's say you had an array, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In C, you can access, what is this? Indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. You can access index 9. It does not produce an error in C. All that C does, whatever data happens to be floating there, it will retrieve it for you. That might be junk data. Often it will be junk data. But, you know, you can just keep reading past the end of an array in C. This is how the language is designed. If you keep reading past the end of an array in C, if you do that long enough, eventually you exceed the boundary that the operating system gives you to play in. In that case, you run into a fatal error called a segmentation fault. Right? So, all of the C standard library functions on strings are really just array functions. But, like, they all have equivalent, or a lot of them have equivalent operations on arrays as well as being on strings. The difference, though, the thing that makes a string is null termination. Null termination. So, if you have a string, HELLO, and this is not just in C, this is like everywhere for everything, this is just a rule, every language, right? The final character of every string is always the null character. So, yes, the null character. If you take a look at your ASCII table, is this going to be useful? No. This one? This one, yes. You'll notice the very first character in the ASCII table is called null, right? And it's usually like with 2 L's, but that's like 3-letter codes, right? So it's 0, right? It's a numeric value of 0 at the end of every single string ever made, right? The purpose of this, we always have a pointer to the first character in a string, so we always know where they start. What this is it's a reserved value that always designates the end of a string, so that this thing can be straightforwardly processed by C standard library functions that don't know how big arrays are, without running into the problem of running past the end of the array and into bad memory, right? If you're ever in an environment where you actually have to allocate the number of characters to a string, which is rare in modern languages, but if you ever program C, you'd probably run into this sort of thing. If you imagine that a string only has the number of characters in it that you can see, you're going to not allocate space for that null terminating character. What this means is that if a C standard library function is run on it, its stopping condition is that it hits null terminating character.
Oh, okay.
Right? So basically you're taking a gamble that there must be some 0 between here and a segmentation fault. Right?
Yeah.
Which is usually a pretty good gamble actually, because about half of all memory at any given time is instantiated, is zeros for, whatever reason. The longer the system's been running, the less true that is. So, yeah, basically, it will keep running until it hits a 0, and just read garbage until it finds a 0, and then it stops.
What is it? What could it read if it doesn't find a 0? Like, does it go into the rest of the memory and just start reading random things?
See, it reads random things only because things are randomly placed in memory.
In memory,
right?
yeah, they're written randomly.
Because it's reading it sequentially. But yeah, what else? So the question is, what else is being used by this memory? Your variables, your other data structures, your other strings.
Suddenly I see all the code for games I had on Steam just pop in because I didn't have it.
Well, see, you're stuck inside of the box that the operating system gave you.
Oh.
So really, most of the time, it's only dangerous to itself,
Oh.
right? But
Most.
this is read and write privileges, not just read privileges. So by by going past the end of the data structure, you actually have the ability to write into variables that, let's say this is like X, right? This is the start of your array, and let's say there's 300 address spaces between the two, right? Which means that if this is array A at 300, and you set that to 5, you have written to 5 without actually having written through X. That is possible in C, right? So the trick is, there's actually no way of knowing what that offset is, because it's random and determined by the operating system. So it can't be relied upon, but a lot of viruses in the early sort of in the 90s period, operated on this writing past the end of arrays problem. So, the moral of the story is that segmentation faults are good and your friend. Because,
Otherwise,
well, here's the thing, right? When you actually have access to pointers, an uninitialized pointer has a value of 0, right? Which means if you write to it, you write to the first memory sector in your RAM. You want to guess what the first memory sector used in your RAM is all about?
operating system.
Operating system shit, that's right. You don't want to interfere with that. I mean, unless you're like elite hacker type person who could actually know what the contents of that memory is and modify it in order to do malicious stuff. But anyway, so that's why that's why your memory is sandboxed for your applications, because computers back before that was the case. They would have problems with people overstepping their memory bounds, shall we say. And so that's what the point of null termination is. That's why all of the string, and that's like, when you use C standard library strings, that's what you're doing. These are the deep magics that you're playing with, all right? And, you know, in C you can get into problems like this pretty innocuously as well, like providing a character instead of a string to something that's expecting a string. It will still process it, but it will run into this because characters are not null terminated, because they're just a character. But anyway, so there you go. Maybe that was interesting. Questions? Everybody's like, no. So. So JSON then. So HTTP supports sending string data back to the client, right? String data is not variables. String data is not arrays. String data is not associative arrays. We are, like, fundamentally, we are throwing strings around the internet, right? Unless you're, like, using a specific protocol that allows you to send binary data, which is used in the case of, like, transferring image files and stuff that's actually binary encoded and that sort of thing. But for our purposes right here, right now, we are talking about transferring strings around, and that's good enough most of the time, right? So, in order to send the data that we now know how to write in PHP to the client, we need some way of organizing that data, a standard way of organizing the data, so that both the client and the server interpret a string the same way, right? Because if they don't interpret the string the same way, then, you know, instead of the server saying jump and the client saying how high, or I guess the client saying jump and the server saying how high, the client will say jump, and the server will say, okay, here's this fish I bought for you, you know? It's important that the communication gets along. So, there are various ways of doing this, but like XML can be used for this purpose as well. But XML is clunky and antiquated, and nobody likes it. And if we could find an alternative to HTML, we probably would at this point, because holy crow, it's not that fun. Anybody think HTML is fun?
HTML.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, you like it?
It's
Okay.
really amazing.
I hate it.
Yeah. But like the tags, right? The tags are a pain.
Unless you use ES Visual Studio. That's all.
Okay, but like doing stuff by hand, right? you know, we can,
I'm usually going into front-end development, I love it.
okay, alright. Alright, sure, okay. I find it clunky. I'll just put it out there. I find HTML clunky, but, you know. Alright. Anyway, XML is like worse than HTML. It's basically HTML where you get to define the tag names. So, you know. But anyway, so we have JavaScript object notation, or JSON. Basically, JavaScript object notation is a standardized notation where arrays get square braces and associative arrays get curly braces, which is, by the way, the same convention which is used in Python. And all other data is just kind of put in correctly in the correct spots. And both client and server know what they're talking about. JSON is actually a sort of increasingly important format, not just for web applications. Lots and lots of people are now using, lots of applications are now using JSON or JSON-derived formats to send data between applications, because it's actually very convenient for translating information encoded in object-oriented systems. It's object notation, folks, right? So, you can think of it as an alternative to comma-separated value CSV files. You guys know what a CSV file is?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Wonderful. Comma-separated value. A CSV file is literally just like a bunch of numbers in a text file separated by commas.
I mean, could be strings also.
Could be strings, yeah, could be lots of stuff. Well, it's a file format. So,
You turn like .txt file, CSV.
yeah. Yeah, like file, like the longer you're a programmer, the more you should realize that file extensions are kind of a myth. No, like seriously.
It's just different ways that you organize it,
Yeah.
and it's all just text at the end of it.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's a way the computer will read it, and that's about it.
Thank you, Unix. Because Unix developed that standard that everything should be based on characters in the file system. Basically, there's only one important distinction in files. Is it binary data, or is it text-based data, right? And if it's binary, you can't read it as text. And that's all you really need to know. Everything else can be read as text, to varying degrees of success. So, yeah, like, you yourself, the programmer, can make up your own file formats. If you want, you can make, like, .school file formats and put all of your school files in .school.
I know dot
You know?
Rust, which is just used for one of my games.
Right? Yeah, like, the only purpose of a file extension is for the operating system to decide what program it should be open for. Right? And also secondarily for, like, more restrictive programs to decide which files they're allowed to open. Right? Like, for example, if you have a plain text editor and you open a docx file in it, it will happily do so, right? But if you take a plain text format, an unusual one, let's say, and you try to open that up in Microsoft Word, it will a lot of the time complain at you that you're opening a file of the wrong format, or it's like, oh, this is a plain text file. Are you sure you want to open it? Because really, you should be doing everything and all of your work inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. You're a good citizen, right? Yeah, no, it's like file extensions themselves are they're not as fixed as people think they are, and because nobody here should graduate this program and still have such normie ideas about file extensions. This is what I'm talking about. Why I'm talking about.
Question.
Yes.
No,
No question.
No question.
All right. All right. Good. So anyway. So we have a function in PHP, JSON encode, functions very similarly to the function in JavaScript, response arrow JSON. In this case, response is JSON tells an AJAX request that it tells the AJAX request that the incoming data is encoded in JSON, and therefore it just decodes it according to that, right? JSON encode must be used on the client's or on the server side in order for this to work on the client side, right? These are two halves of the same transaction, all right? Outgoing data must be JSON encoded in order for JSON decoding to be meaningful. Yes?
Can you explain the last part one again?
Sure. So, client, server, right? The HTTP request, think like the AJAX requests in assignment 5 for client side at the end, right? The one that was JSON encoded, right? The data that's being transferred through the HTTP packet, right? That must be a JSON, that must be JSON encoded, right? It must be string data, but it must organize itself the way that both of these people are expecting, right? So long as the contents of the HTTP packet are JSON encoded, this line works in JavaScript. Everything works, right? It's receiving the type of data it's expecting, right? PHP doesn't just send JSON data, right? What it sends is strings, right? Here, let me give you an example. Let's take our let's see. What happens if we echo B? Right? Right, up to this point, all we've been echoing is something out of B. What happens if we ask to echo the whole thing, right? Array to string conversion in this thing on line 16, and the output is array, right? So PHP does not natively convert an array or an associative array into something that the client receives and understands. In fact, it doesn't. All it's doing is simple typecasting, right? And it's saying, oh, you want to send a string? Okay, the array version, the string version of an array is the word array. There you go, right? But if you JSON encode it, JSON encode, there you go. The string that's sent instead is all of the data that's contained, right? And things can get a little bit more complicated than this as well. For example, if I made this into an array itself, other data.
So basically, JSON encode function is formatting the data in a way server is expecting.
Yes. So, oh man, this is cut off at the bottom. So you can see, like, if I throw a list in here, right? That list also appears in the JSON. Now, JSON is a file, JSON is, well, it's also a file format. But JSON is a format in which white space is ignored. White space takes up space, so when you're sending it over the internet, it just kind of removes all the white space, and you just get this very unattractive clump of data, right? In general, when human beings are working with JSON, they tend to like use like indentation rules, similar to how Python is laid out, or any other language. So, yeah. Also, have you guys heard of YAML? YAML, YAML. So, it is like I wanna mention it here because in probably a decade, it's going to have supplanted a great deal of JavaScript. So what YAML is, it stands for yet another markup language. Right? It's actually a superset of JSON, so all valid JSON files are also valid YAML files, but basically all it's doing is applying Python-style rules to JSON to get rid of all the braces and quotation marks. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Coding in Python right now because it's quicker than coding in JavaScript.
Oh, you know these people know what they're talking about because, anybody know what Red Hat is?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but
It's a Linux distribution. So, YAML, 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 YAML. Yeah, this is what a YAML file looks like. So, much more like human readable. But you can see that this is still like key value pairs, right? And like instead of doing square braces, it does like a list of dashed items for a list.
I think I prefer this one.
You prefer the brackets? You're kicking it old school?
Yeah, I prefer it.
Yeah.
It makes things readable for me.
So you will find as you continue on and like actually work in industry and stuff, at the moment YAML files are used for configuration on a lot of different applications. It does everything that JSON does, and it's a lot more readable, so there's like a push to start adopting it instead of JSON in a lot of places. And you'll find like, you just like encode YAML, decode YAML instead of JSON, and so it goes. It's a slightly less compact format though, so for if like data transfer is your worry, then you should still be using JSON. And if no human is ever gonna read it, then it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to look nice, right? So, so that's what YAML is. I just thought I'd throw that in there because, maybe you guys are interested in current industry trends. Okay, where are we here? Alright. So, when we did client side, we received JSON data from the server and then displayed it. But there is absolutely no reason why you can't receive JSON data from the client and process it on the server, right? It's not a one-way street, right? The server can produce and the client can decode, and the client can encode and the server decode. Both are possible. So the JSON decode function takes a string which is encoded as JSON and decodes it, constructs up a data structure from those pieces. The data structure produced is the return result of the JSON decode call. And there are some options as well. If you, yeah, sorry?
Sorry, so JSON encodes pretty much, like you're taking a file from the server side to the client, like, extracting the file from the server side to the, client side, then decode is client side to the server side.
Let me do a diagram. So, HTTP, so if this is HTTP world, right? Just imagine that as a whole bunch of complicated network infrastructure. So, everything that the HTTP transports must be a string, right? So on the server, right, we have some miscellaneous data, right? If we want to send this data to the client, right, let's say the thing we want at the end of this is A is 1, 2, I forget, does JavaScript use curly braces for arrays? Yeah, okay.
No, not for arrays.
Not for arrays? Yeah.
I think it just uses the
It's used square brackets.
Square? Okay, we're good then. So, this is just data, not a string. To be sent through HTTP, it must be strings. So, JSON, so encode yields, in this case it literally just wraps it in quotation marks, right? That gets sent out, and then to get this, we have to decode, and then we can get the data structure back, right? But while it's traveling through the internet, it's a string, right? JSON is string. It's just a way of formatting a string. Make sense?
Yeah.
Then in reverse, let's say we had B, right? To send that back to the server, we have to encode it as a string, send it through the network infrastructure, then it comes back and it gets it decoded on the other side, and then yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so to receive on the server, you decode it, to send, encode.
Yeah. So, like the general rule, whoever's doing the sending encodes, whoever's doing the receiving decodes, right? And it depends, like who's decoding and who's encoding will depend on the direction that the packet is traveling.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Question?
If it's a string, do you have a character limit? So for like a JSON file sending over HTTP, is there a size limit?
I guess if you use post, there's no limit. Because I know like with post, like they don't have limits versus gets from the client side.
This is like networking stuff.
Is it?
Yeah.
Sure. Like I'm wondering if you have a JSON file that's so large, do you have to like split it down into packets and send them.
The moment you
One
go
at a
to
time.
packets, you're already on that.
So, according to this, post requests don't have a size limitation.
But gets has a size limitation.
I guess so.
We all know forum
Yes,
man,
I remember that.
forum answers are.
I remember that from
Yeah.
client side, because,
Data is traveling in URLs.
like, post is a limitation, that's why people prefer using post versus get.
Yeah.
There's a problem with posts, I can't remember.
In practice, a large transfer will be broken into like much smaller packets anyways, right? Like when we say post has no size limit, what we're really saying is like, you know, an unlimited number of packets can compose one transaction. So, but that's like 555 program stuff. Yes.
So what role does YAML play in this diagram?
So YAML is a way of encoding and decoding, right? In places where the information needs to be read by a human, current industry trend is to try to use YAML instead of JSON because it's more readable. But in this course, I don't think we're going to be using YAML. I thought that you might find that useful information in your career. Any other questions? Good. I feel like we've had a very good discussion today. But
The whole thing about post method not having an upper limit, that sounds so much like that thing about the, you talked about this in Java, the program that theoretically left running would run till the death of the universe.
yes,
Sounds so like theoretically, yes.
yeah, I mean, in theory, you could.
Theory.
The problem, the issue is like, if ever a transaction actually took more than like a minute, somebody's gonna reset the server, or reset the browser, right? So, cause like, the server is not just gonna like fire packets off into space forever, right? It's also like waiting for handshakes from the client. It's like, oh yeah, I got that one, okay, here's the next one, okay, I got that one, here's the next one, right? Like, these are all problems which have been solved, but not by us. We don't have to worry about that, we're just programmers, right? We're on the programming side, not on the networking side. How these response packets get sent around and back and forward and through and whatever, like is much less important to us than just getting the, getting the file, getting the information transferred from one place to another, right?
Can you tell this kid to think about
Yeah?
about performance for 1 second?
Maybe after class.
Yeah, performance is cool.
Okay, so,
The code works, that's all that matters. It'll finish when I'm
okay.
in my grade, but it will finish.
Just wait till you've done data structures and algorithms, and then you'll be able to write efficient code. So I'd like to pull up. I know we don't have much time left in class, we might not get through all of it, but let's talk about super globals.
Oh, yay.
Yes,
No.
super global. So there is a certain amount of information that a PHP script has available to it, which is readable through the quote-unquote super globals. These are a set of arrays or data structures which collect up useful information that you probably will need at some point. The one that we've already sort of been dealing with is get. So when we receive parameters through a GET request, those parameters are saved to this GET superglobal. Note that that's an underscore, right? That's $_ get right there. So, like that. The underlining it really is not a great idea, but you know, links are underlined, so what are you going to do? So, in general, the rules for these are very similar to, like you should treat these the same way you would treat inputs, parameters in a function. You theoretically can write these, but you shouldn't, right? For example, some of the data shows up multiple times. Request, for example, contains both get and post data. So if you know that it's get data, and you like modify the data in the get superglobal for some reason, those changes are not going to appear in request, because that you haven't written to request, you only wrote to get. The data is not being synchronized. So you've got get, post, hopefully those are self-explanatory.
Select is also right.
Which? Sorry?
I heard that select is also another,
Select? Is that in my list? No?
on
Request is a more general one. It can get and post data from cookies, lots of different request formats, as you can tell by the fact that it's called request instead of one particular request format. Server gives you information about the server that the PHP script is running on. You know, file paths and that sort of thing, useful stuff in certain circumstances. Session stores data for a user on the server. It's used to maintain user-specific information across multiple pages or multiple visits to a page across multiple pages. Cookie allows you to get data from cookies. I think we are going to be writing cookies at some point in this course. Files contains data about files which have been uploaded via post requests. We are going to be doing stuff with file uploads reasonably quickly. And environment variables used to access system-related information. Environment variables such as all of those lovely bash environment variables that I have been talking about, you know, because people get annoyed with me because I talk about Linux too much. But there's a reason I talk about it so much. It actually matters. So, anyway, yes?
So server, for example, it's metadata about the server. Who writes the metadata? Or does it just pull data from the server itself and generate it itself? You know what I mean? How does it get the file?
The entries in this array are created by the web server, therefore there is no guarantee that every web browser will provide any of these.
Oh, okay.
So the web, like,
So you
Apache.
would write it on the server,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah, like, an Apache server will say, yo, I'm an Apache server, version 8.3 or something like that, you know? Yeah. Make sense? Any questions? Motion to dismiss? Anyone? All right, do I have a seconder? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
What was the question?
The ayes have it. See you all